Thank you, Paul. Before I begin, I'd like to, first of all, pay respect to the Tlingit Nation, upon whose land we're meeting in today. A little bit of background about myself. I've come from two First Nations. I'm Tahltan and Tlingit. In fact, my Tlingit side are the Taku Kwan originally, who came out from the Taku Inlet here. My great-grandfather, in fact, was Chief Taku Jack of the Atlin Inland Tlingit. So it's very nice to be here in Tlingit territory, and I pay my respects to the Tlingit Nation of Alaska. Thank you. My co-chair, Mayor Dave Penarowski, sends his regrets. He couldn't make this conference. He wanted to, but it conflicted with his schedule to attend another meeting in southern BC with the BC Municipality Mayors Association. It's a mayor thing. He's attending in southern BC today. The Northwest Transmission Line was formed, as Ed said, to basically energize the northwest of British Columbia. There's clearly economic benefit to energizing that portion of the province due to the overwhelming showings of mineral deposits that many companies such as Ed are exploring. And so what happened was about 40 communities got together. First Nation development companies, companies like Hard Creek Nickel and others with mineral interests in the area, and they had the backing of thousands of northern residents, and we raised money to begin a lobby effort to get the Northwest Transmission Line up and running and meeting the needs of Highway 37 residents over the long term. Today we're waiting on bated breath. We've completed an environmental assessment process, which was a 180-day process. We're waiting for the Minister of Forests, Pat Bell, and the Environment Minister to come forward with a decision which we suspect will greenlight the building of the line. I'm of the opinion that we haven't heard yet about the announcement because in British Columbia there's a leadership race for the Liberal Party, which is the governing party in British Columbia right now, and I suspect that they're going to leave the announcement of the Northwest Transmission Line to the new Premier, whomever that may be. So to say the Northwest Transmission Coalition work is over would be premature at this point. I believe that our second area of work, which is very important both to Alaska and to Yukon, is to now reach out to our neighbors and try to develop and make reality the intertie with Alaska and a connection to the Yukon. And I believe we have the membership in place with the right connections both in Alaska and in Yukon to be able to begin these discussions and move forward in creating, as Ed was talking about earlier, a northern grid system which is both economically sustainable, which is definite social and economic benefits for the region as a whole. I'm a firm believer that this region of North America is in fact the breadbasket for North America over the next 100 years. Clearly there are many resources that require exploitation and will benefit a lot of the residents of not only North America but around the world. And I believe that we need to be able to work together and be able to understand the significance that this region of North America plays, not only to all of North America, but to the rest of the world. And I think there's a real opportunity for Alaska to play a huge part in that role. The key, I believe, now, after we wait for the announcement from British Columbia on the building of the transmission line, is for Alaska, the Yukon, and northern BC First Nations to galvanize our collective influence to work with these three jurisdictions to make this intertie with Alaska a reality and make the intertie with Yukon a foregone conclusion as well. I believe that on both sides of the border, First Nations carry with themselves a huge amount of influence that both Victoria, Juneau, Washington, D.C. will listen to. And I think that those are your key partners in moving forward with this intertie, that getting First Nation support on side and working closely with them will, in my view, raise the bar in achieving that success for the intertie. To that end, the Northwest Transmission Line Coalition wants to play a bigger cooperation role with the ACE Coalition. We're interested in sitting on your board. We're interested in doing what we can to work with the First Nations in Alaska to try and galvanize their support with this intertie project. And I believe that, you know, I mean, I grew up in northern BC and Yukon, and I've spent a lot of time in Alaska over the years that I worked in the media industry. And, you know, Southeast Alaska is beautiful, but it also is a place of future wealth for many reasons. And when I hear stories about communities that are paying extremely high prices for what we in southern BC and elsewhere take for granted, and that being electricity, I scratch my head. I mean, I understand that, you know, the American experience is based on free enterprise and you pay the supply and demand ratio, but you know, when I hear about huge prices per megawatt hour for electricity to households, I shake my head, and I believe there's a better way to deliver, you know, affordable electricity to residents and for your fishing industry. I mean, if you're able to have proper electricity prices, then you can have communities building your southeast commercial salmon industry to much greater lengths than it currently sits at. That's my personal opinion. To that end, I think we need, you know, to work with your ACE coalition to help educate Alaska First Nations about the economic and social benefits with the green energy economy. I think it's not something that should be looked at as something that is fearful. I mean, I recognize that change is fearful. We as humans don't like to see things change. We become very comfortable, and I think in the future of, you know, this region of the state, and I look at graphs which show that you're going to be experiencing a population decline. I don't think, you know, deep in our hearts we want to leave this beautiful land. It's absolutely stunning. It's a beautiful place to live, and I think that if you can give young people a vision of the future and a better hope for tomorrow, I think the intertie is central to that opportunity that you need to be able to deliver to your younger people. We're willing to put our hand forward in whatever way we can to meet with your governor and perhaps your U.S. administration to push for movement on dollars to help build this intertie. I'm listening to some of the video presentations, and I see that you're galvanizing that political support to try and monetize your coalition so that you can move this project forward. And like Congressman Young said, I think you should be coming here next year or in Skagway or wherever you decide to hold your conference next year with some very real milestones that you've reached. And I believe that the Northwest Transmission Line Coalition can help you reach those milestones, and I'm committing to doing whatever we can to help you do that. I keep hearing that Alaska has a huge resource of green energy to be able to move forward. And it's nice to know that you have that potential, and we also have to remember that every project must sit on itself for its own economic merits. So while there are, you know, huge numbers thrown about, I think there's enough numbers of doable projects that make the intertie a necessity. But also, having come from the Tahltan side, I can tell you that some of the fear on the Tahltan leadership is that if the intertie gets built, then energy projects on the BC side of the border might fall to the wayside. And I don't believe that that's true. I think it's very clear that to create a market or an export market in terms of electrons, it has to have the capacity to move back and forth. And right now the NTL line is energized or proposed to be energized to 287 kV, but there have been provisions put into the design that if there is enough need for it, that we can twin that line. And I believe the intertie is a prime example of the need to twin that line. So I don't think that there's any real concern about there not being a capacity to move electrons back and forth between the jurisdictions. Having said that, I guess my next statement is more to my own Tahltan leadership, that we need to realize that energy production and export can only be realized by capacity, and we need to create that market capacity, and the intertie is an integral part of that market capacity to move electrons back and forth. And so my comments are more directed at my own people by saying you shouldn't be afraid of the intertie. In fact, the intertie will open up new opportunities both for our people and for Alaskans together. And I think if both sides of the border, particularly the First Nations, if you were to get together and start talking about how you can take advantage of that and utilize it, I think collectively we've got the political influence to move things forward. Having said that, there is a third ally, and that being the Yukon. Having grown up and lived in the Yukon, I have a lot of contacts with the current government and with the chair of Yukon Energy, and I believe that there's real merit in taking a two-pronged approach from the intertie to Alaska to the Highway 37 north to the Yukon border to connect the Yukon up to the grid as well. And I think we, as Ed had said, we have a bigger vision of building this part of both Canada and Alaska, and I think we have what it takes to move this forward. As NTL co-chair, I commit to reaching out to Alaska's First Nations to create influence now in Juneau, Washington, D.C., and Whitehorse, and Victoria. I think that, I'm putting a call out to Alaskan First Nations to meet with us, and we're only here for one day, but I'll be here all day tomorrow, so I'm more than willing to meet with Alaskan First Nation representatives to see on how we can start moving forward so we can create a cooperative venture, both amongst each other and with our neighbors, our non-native neighbors who we love just as much as our own children. Thank you for that time, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the speakers throughout the day. And I believe that, like everybody else, my vision is I want to make a difference in this part of the country. We have the opportunity to make that difference. It's here today in this room, and I don't want to see, stutter and sputter and burnout. I give my appreciation to Paul, who works tirelessly for this coalition. Ernie and Rhonda, and I've made great friends here, and I want to keep those friendships long into the future, and I want to look back 20 years from now and say I helped create a better tomorrow for this region of North America. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. I'm just going to take care of a few basic announcements here, and then as you heard earlier, Senator McGuire is tied up in committee. We wanted, and she wanted very much, to come down and talk about her assets legislation that she's introduced this year. And it's a new paradigm, I guess, of how we could go about financing major energy projects in the state. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it myself. I do need to go back and address some of the things that Gordon said as well, because as I said, it's a conversation, and I'm having that conversation now with you. Pending my board's approval, we certainly want the Northwest Powerline Transmission on my board. They're doing what makes it possible for us, and they're moving forward. And they blessed me with the opportunity to attend their meeting in Vancouver and address them a period back. And at that meeting, they made a very, very significant decision for us. At the time, they had on their plate the discussion of, well, do we just disband? We've done our job. We've got the Northwest Transmission Line. Do we just fold up our tent and go home? And they didn't choose to do that. What they chose to do was to stay in existence, make another call for funds, which they're very significantly good at, which I'm not. I'm going to take some lessons from them. I'm not very good at raising money. But they're going to do that, and they decided that their goals in the future were twofold. And I was so excited about what those goals were, because one of them was to assist in making the connection into Alaska. Their other goal is to move that Northwest Transmission line north toward the Yukon and to twin it, make it bigger. So I'm really excited about where they're at. I certainly am going to accept every bit of help they can give me because they're wonderful. They've already proven it can be done by a grassroots organization moving federal governments and local governments forward on a project that benefits everyone. So I'm really excited about that. The other point that Gordon made that we all here in Southeast need to be very cognizant of, those electrons will go either direction. And right now, we think that we're getting close to maximizing the production in southern Southeast of electricity. And before we can bring another project online, if we actually were to maximize our usage of electricity, heaven forbid, maybe we could use some of those electrons coming from the east for a little while we got our projects online.